Emma had always imagined this day as the happiest of her life. After months of planning, picking out the perfect venue, the perfect dress, and the perfect details, everything was finally coming together. Tomorrow she would be walking down the aisle, marrying the man she had spent the last 4 years of her life with. Daniel was her best friend, her rock, the person she thought she knew better than anyone. The night before the wedding, Emma was at her parents' house, surrounded by her bridesmaids. They were drinking champagne, laughing and reminiscing about old memories. The air was filled with excitement, and Emma couldn't shake the overwhelming happiness she felt. This was exactly how things were supposed to be. She had been through her fair share of heartbreak in life. Her parents' divorce, moving to a new city when she was a teenager, struggling to find her place in the world. But Daniel had always been the constant. He was the man who had promised to stand by her no matter what, who had reassured her through every doubt and fear. It wasn't until midnight that Emma decided to call it a night. She wanted to be well rested for the big day, and she knew the next 24 hours would be exhausting. As she lay in bed, her wedding dress hanging just a few feet away, she felt the kind of peace she rarely allowed herself to feel. Everything was going to be okay. Then her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, assuming it was one of her bridesmaids sending a funny message in their group chat. But something made her glance at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I thought you should know. Daniel and Olivia eloped tonight." For a moment, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Her brain refused to process the words. She sat up in bed, rereading the message over and over. Olivia? Her stepsister Olivia? It had to be a mistake. Someone's idea of a cruel joke. Her hands were shaking as she immediately tried calling Daniel. Straight to voicemail. Then Olivia. Same thing. Her heart pounded in her chest as she opened her messages with Daniel, scrolling through their conversation from earlier that day. Nothing had seemed wrong. He had told her he loved her, that he couldn't wait to see her walk down the aisle. Panic rising in her throat, Emma called her mother. "Emma, what's wrong?" Her mother's groggy voice came through the line. "Have you talked to Olivia?" Emma's voice was uneven. "No, why? I just got a text saying she and Daniel, they eloped. This has to be some kind of mistake, right? Maybe it's a prank. Maybe someone hacked his phone or..." But before she could finish, her mom exhaled sharply. "Oh my God. What? I just got a text from Olivia." Her mother's voice was quiet, hesitant, as if she didn't want to say the words out loud. Emma held her breath. "Mom, I'm sorry. Please don't be mad. I know this is crazy, but Daniel and I are in Vegas. We got married tonight." Emma felt like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. She could hear her mom saying something, asking if she was still there, but the words weren't registering. The room around her seemed to tilt. Daniel and Olivia. Married. It didn't make sense. The night before her wedding, her phone slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The next few hours were a blur. Her bridesmaids woke up, crowding into her room as soon as they heard her crying. Her mother arrived minutes later, wrapping her in a hug as she tried to make sense of the betrayal. Her father, who had been divorced from her mother for years but had still promised to walk her down the aisle, showed up in the early morning looking like he was ready to hunt Daniel down. And the worst part? No one had any real answers. Olivia wasn't responding to calls. Daniel had gone completely silent. It was as if they had both vanished, leaving Emma to deal with the wreckage. By 9 a.m., Emma was sitting on the floor of her childhood bedroom, still in the clothes she had worn the night before, while her best friend, Hannah, paced back and forth. "They have to come back eventually," Hannah muttered, furious. "They can't just disappear off the face of the earth. I mean, what were they thinking? Who does this?" Emma stared at the carpet, numb. "I don't know." Her mother sat beside her, stroking her hair. "We have to cancel everything," she said gently. "The venue, the catering. I'll take care of the calls. You don't need to do anything right now." Emma nodded, but she barely felt present. How was this her life? How had she gone from planning the happiest day of her life to this? At 10 a.m., the first guests started calling. People had flown in from different cities, taken time off work, booked hotel rooms, all to see her and Daniel get married. How was she supposed to tell them that the groom had run off with her stepsister? "Maybe we should just say the wedding was postponed," Hannah suggested. But even she didn't sound convinced. No, Emma finally said, finding her voice. I don't want to protect them. People deserve to know what really happened. So, she did something she never thought she would do. She typed out a message and sent it to everyone on her wedding guest list. Hi everyone. I wanted to let you know that the wedding is cancelled. Daniel has chosen to be with someone else, and while this isn't how I imagine things happening, I appreciate all of your love and support. Thank you for understanding. Simple. Direct. No room for speculation. Within minutes, her phone exploded with messages of shock, outrage, and sympathy. Some people called, others sent voice notes full of disbelief. Her aunt asked if this was a joke. Her cousin offered to fly to Vegas and handle Daniel personally. But no one was more furious than Emma's father. That little coward isn't answering his phone? He growled, pacing the living room. Fine. I'll go to his apartment. See if he left any of his things behind. Emma barely had the energy to respond. By the afternoon, the reality of the situation had started to settle in. The wedding was officially off. The venue was cancelled. The guests were making other plans. And she was just supposed to move on. But then, something unexpected happened. A call came through from an unknown number. Hannah picked up Emma's phone before she could stop her. Hello. A pause. Then her eyes widened. Well, if it isn't the backstabbing sister herself. Emma's stomach twisted. Hannah pressed the speakerphone button without hesitation. Emma, Olivia's voice came through, shaky and uncertain. We need to talk. Emma clenched her jaw. Her grief quickly being replaced by something else. Something colder. Something sharper. She had spent the last 12 hours crying over Olivia and Daniel. Over the wedding that would never happen. Now she was just angry. Then start talking, she said. Daniel sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the cheap floral-patterned comforter, his head pounding from a mix of exhaustion and regret. The neon lights from the Las Vegas Strip flickered through the half-closed blinds, casting strange shapes on the walls. He hadn't slept properly since they had arrived 2 days ago, and neither had Olivia. She was in the bathroom crying. Again. The excitement, the thrill, the rush of their impulsive decision had lasted for all of 5 hours before reality had come crashing down. They had arrived at a small chapel just off the Strip, laughing, drunk on adrenaline. Olivia had clung to his arm giddy, while the officiant, an Elvis impersonator, read the vows. The ceremony had been quick, surreal. At the time, it had felt like the ultimate declaration of love. They had convinced themselves that they were star-crossed lovers, who couldn't wait another second to be together. That they were proving something to the world, to Emma, to themselves. But now Daniel couldn't remember what that something was. The morning after, they had woken up in their hotel room, surrounded by the scattered remains of the previous night. An empty champagne bottle, a crumpled marriage certificate, Olivia's wedding dress, which had been nothing more than a short white cocktail dress she had picked up in a boutique hours before the ceremony. It had all been fun and reckless until the adrenaline wore off and the consequences set in. Daniel's phone had over 50 missed calls. Emma, her mother, his own parents, friends, even his boss had called him. Emma's message to the wedding guests had spread fast. By now everyone knew. And they weren't just angry. They were disgusted. Daniel had tried to ignore it, convincing himself that people would eventually understand. That they'd see how much he and Olivia loved each other. That Emma would move on and in time this would all blow over. But then Olivia had broken down in tears. I didn't think it would feel like this, she had whispered the first night, after they had returned from a disastrous dinner where even the waitress had given them judgmental looks. Like what? Daniel had asked, trying to keep his frustration in check. Like we did something wrong. Daniel had wanted to argue. To tell her they hadn't done anything wrong. That love was messy and unpredictable. But even as he opened his mouth, the words felt hollow. He knew exactly what they had done. They had humiliated Emma. They had betrayed her in a way that wasn't just cruel. It was unforgivable. And worst of all, Olivia was starting to realize it too. Now, 2 days into their so-called honeymoon, Olivia was holed up in the bathroom, avoiding him, while he sat on the edge of the bed, unable to shake the growing dread in his chest. He picked up his phone, scrolling through the latest messages. Most were variations of how could you? You ruined everything, and you're disgusting. He had deleted Emma's number, too ashamed to see her name on his screen. But one message stood out among the rest. It was from his bank. His stomach dropped as he opened the notification. Your recent charge of $8,500 has been approved. Remaining balance, $3,200. Daniel blinked, rereading the message. He knew he had spent a lot the past few days, flights, hotel, food, the rushed wedding, but $8,500? What the hell had Olivia bought? He barely had time to process it before the bathroom door swung open. Olivia stepped out, her face blotchy from crying, her makeup smudged. I want to go home, she said, her voice small. Daniel exhaled, rubbing his face. We can't just leave. We just got here. I don't care, Olivia snapped. Everyone hates us. My mom won't even talk to me. Do you know what she said to me earlier? That she's ashamed of me. Ashamed, Daniel. I can't deal with this. Daniel knew she was expecting him to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But he couldn't, because he didn't believe it. Did you spend $8,000 on something? He asked instead. Olivia blinked. What? My account. There's an $8,000 charge. What did you buy? She hesitated. I put the hotel and flights on your card. And the dress. And a few other things. A few other things? His voice sharpened. She crossed her arms. Well, what was I supposed to do, Daniel? I left everything behind for you. I didn't exactly have time to grab my savings before we ran away. Did I? His stomach twisted. He had always known Olivia was impulsive. But this was something else. You didn't leave everything behind, he said coldly. You took something. Me. You took me from Emma. Olivia flinched. A long silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. I just thought. Olivia's voice wavered. I thought we'd be happy. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, so did I. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Outside, the sounds of Vegas nightlife roared on, car horns, laughter, music. People having the time of their lives, oblivious to the disaster unfolding in the tiny hotel room. Finally, Olivia swallowed hard and whispered, Do you regret it? Daniel didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know if he regretted Olivia. But he sure as hell regretted how they had done this. And that was almost worse. That night, neither of them slept. By morning, Olivia had already packed her things, throwing clothes haphazardly into her suitcase. I'm leaving, she announced. Daniel watched her from the bed, his body too heavy with exhaustion to argue. Where are you going? Back home, she said. I can't do this anymore. I thought I could, but I can't. My whole life is ruined. Everyone hates me. She shook her head. I need to fix this. Fix what? You think running away again is going to make things better? She clenched her jaw. At least I'm trying. Daniel wanted to tell her that this wasn't something that could be fixed, that no amount of apologizing would erase what they had done. But he didn't stop her. He just watched as she grabbed her bag and walked to the door. Then just before she left, she turned back to face him. You should talk to Emma, she said quietly. If you ever want to make this right, you need to talk to her. Daniel scoffed. She never wants to see me again. Olivia hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I wouldn't want to see you either. And then she was gone. Daniel sat in the silence of the empty hotel room, staring at the crumpled marriage certificate on the floor. The honeymoon was over, and the nightmare was just beginning. Emma hadn't expected to hear from Olivia again. After the disaster of what should have been her wedding day, she had made a conscious effort to push both Olivia and Daniel out of her mind. It wasn't easy. Everywhere she went, people were still talking about it. The betrayal had become the kind of scandal that people whispered about in cafes and texted each other about late at night. Some distant relatives had even tried to check in, under the guise of concern, but clearly fishing for gossip. But Emma wasn't interested in feeding their curiosity. Instead, she threw herself into moving forward. She went back to work at the marketing agency, where she had built her career. She focused on herself, on healing, on reclaiming her life, on proving to herself that she was more than just someone's discarded fiancé. And for a while it worked. Until Olivia showed up at her apartment unannounced. Emma had just gotten home from work when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. Hannah had texted earlier saying she was stuck in traffic, and Emma wasn't in the mood for deliveries. so she hesitated before answering. But when she pulled open the door and saw Olivia standing there, looking disheveled and anxious, every ounce of progress she had made threatened to unravel. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Olivia looked thinner than Emma remembered, her usually flawless makeup smudged, her expression tight with stress. She was gripping the strap of her purse so hard that her knuckles were white. Emma folded her arms. "What do you want?" Olivia swallowed. "Can I come in?" Emma let out a humorless laugh. "You think you can just show up here after everything and expect me to invite you in?" I need to talk to you," Olivia said quickly. "Please. It's important." Emma wanted to slam the door in her face. But something in Olivia's expression stopped her. Not guilt. Emma wasn't even sure Olivia was capable of feeling guilt, but fear. Against her better judgment, Emma stepped aside. "5 minutes," she said flatly. Olivia rushed inside, glancing around as if expecting to be thrown out at any moment. She hesitated near the kitchen counter, before finally perching on the edge of a stool. Emma didn't sit. She leaned against the wall, arms still crossed. "Talk." Olivia took a deep breath. "I left Daniel." Emma blinked, caught off guard. She had expected an apology, though she wouldn't have accepted it, or some pathetic excuse about how things had just happened. But not this. "Okay," Emma said slowly. "And why do I care?" Olivia flinched at the coldness in her tone. Because I think I made a huge mistake." Emma let out a sharp laugh. "Which part? The part where you ran off with my fiancé? Or the part where you thought that would somehow end well for you?" Olivia pressed her lips together. "I know I deserve that. But Emma, things aren't what I thought they'd be. Daniel, he's not. I don't know, he's not the person I thought he was." Emma tilted her head. "Really? Because I knew exactly who he was. Maybe you should have asked me before throwing your life away for him." Olivia looked down, her fingers twisting in her lap. "We rushed into this. We weren't thinking. We got married. And at first it was exciting. But then everything started going wrong. He's stressed all the time. We fight constantly. He keeps bringing up money." And she hesitated. "And I think he blames me." Emma scoffed. "Blames you? For what?" "He's the one who left me at the altar." "I know," Olivia said quickly. "But Emma, we might not even be legally married." Emma stared at her. "Excuse me?" Olivia swallowed hard. "We were in such a rush that night, we didn't double-check everything. The marriage certificate, we didn't sign all the right documents. And apparently the officiant wasn't actually licensed. I found out yesterday when I was trying to figure out how to." She stopped herself. Emma's eyes narrowed. "How to what?" Olivia hesitated, then admitted how to get a divorce. Emma blinked. "Wow, that was fast." Olivia's face flushed with embarrassment. "It's not what I thought it would be. We made a huge mistake, Emma. And now he's freaking out because he spent so much money. And his family won't talk to him." And she broke off, looking genuinely distressed. "He's not handling it well." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Are you telling me Daniel is spiraling?" Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. He's not okay." For the first time, Emma felt something other than anger toward Daniel. Not sympathy. She wasn't sure she'd ever be capable of feeling sympathy for him. But a strange sort of realization. He had ruined his life, just as much as he had ruined hers. And maybe, just maybe, that was justice enough. Emma exhaled. "Olivia, I don't know what you expect me to do with this information." Olivia looked up at her, desperation clear in her eyes. "I need your help." Emma laughed, shaking her head. "You have got to be kidding me." "Not like that," Olivia said quickly. I need advice. I don't know how to fix this." Emma's amusement faded. She studied Olivia, really looking at her for the first time. This wasn't the confident, spoiled stepsister she had known her whole life. This was someone who had backed herself into a corner and had no idea how to get out. "You can't fix this," Emma said simply. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." Olivia looked down, her shoulders slumping. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then quietly she admitted, "I miss you." Emma stiffened. "I know you don't believe me," Olivia continued. "And I don't blame you. But you were my sister. And I ruined that. And I hate myself for it." Emma didn't know what to say to that. She didn't forgive Olivia. She wasn't sure she ever would. But for the first time, she saw Olivia not as the villain of her story, but as something else. Something sad. I think you should leave, Emma said, her voice softer than before. Olivia nodded, wiping at her eyes. She stood up, hesitated for a second, as if she wanted to say something else, then turned and walked toward the door. But just before she left, she glanced back. If he tries to talk to you, be careful, Olivia murmured. He's not himself right now. Emma frowned. What does that mean? Olivia hesitated. Then quietly she said, it means that I think he's about to do something stupid. And then she was gone. Emma stood in the silence of her apartment, Olivia's words hanging heavy in the air. For the first time in weeks she felt something other than pain, other than anger. She felt a chill of unease. Because if Daniel was spiraling, there was no telling what he might do next. Emma hadn't planned on ever speaking to Daniel again. She had spent weeks rebuilding her life, forcing herself to move forward even when it hurt. She had convinced herself that she was done with him, that nothing he did could affect her anymore. But Olivia's warning kept replaying in her mind. He's not himself right now. I think he's about to do something stupid. Emma didn't want to care. She didn't want to let either of them take up any more space in her mind. But as she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, something deep in her gut told her that Olivia wasn't exaggerating. The next morning she got her answer. Her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, but something compelled her to pick up. Emma. The voice on the other end was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. But she knew it instantly. Daniel. Her heart lurched, but she kept her voice cold. How did you get my number? There was a long silence. Then a shaky breath. Please. I need to talk to you. Emma clenched her jaw. Why would I ever want to talk to you? Because I have nothing left, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, Emma didn't know what to say. Then finally she asked, where are you? She found him at a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of place people went when they had nowhere else to go. The neon vacancy sign flickered against the gray morning sky, casting eerie shadows across the cracked pavement. Emma parked her car and hesitated. She had no idea why she was here. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else. Some small stubborn part of her that wanted to see the consequences of his choices up close. She knocked on the door of room 214. It took a minute before it opened. Daniel stood there, looking like a ghost of the man she had once known. His hair was unkempt, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his clothes were wrinkled, as if he had been wearing them for days. For the first time since everything had happened, Emma felt something unexpected. Pity. Not enough to forgive him, but enough to listen. She crossed her arms. What do you want? Daniel stepped back, wordlessly inviting her inside. Emma hesitated before stepping in. The room was small, cluttered with empty takeout containers and half-empty liquor bottles. It smelled like stale air and regret. Daniel sat down on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. I messed up. Emma let out a sharp laugh. No kidding. He flinched. I lost everything, Emma. She raised an eyebrow. Did you think it was going to end any other way? I don't know, he admitted. Maybe I thought we could make it work. That Olivia and I, he broke off, shaking his head. It was never real, was it? Emma didn't answer. Daniel exhaled. She left me, took the rest of my money and disappeared. I don't even know where she is. Emma wasn't surprised. Olivia had always been selfish, impulsive. She had thrown herself into this affair, just as recklessly as she was now trying to escape it. You deserve each other, Emma said flatly. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. Guess not. Since she didn't even stick around long enough to see the damage we did. There was a long silence. Then Daniel finally met her gaze. Do you hate me? Emma took a deep breath. I did, she admitted. For a long time. But now, I don't know. Maybe I just feel done. Daniel looked down at his hands. I don't know how to fix this. You can't, Emma said simply. You don't get to fix this. You don't get to apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. I know, he whispered. Emma studied him for a long moment. She had spent so much time thinking about revenge, about justice, about how she wanted them both to suffer the way she had suffered. But now that she was here, seeing him like this, she realized something. She didn't need revenge. Because karma had already done the job for her. She had survived. She had rebuilt. She had a future. And Daniel had nothing. She took one last look around the room, then turned toward the door. "Goodbye, Daniel," she said. He didn't stop her. And for the first time in a long time, as Emma walked out of that motel room, she felt truly free.